now as calls grow for a ceasefire ahead of a planned peace conference in Geneva in the new year. Syria is facing one of the greatest humanitarian crises of recent history. By October last year, 250,000 refugees had fled the country. That figure is now over 2 million, up to half of whom are children. They're staying mainly in camps on the Syrian borders, in basic shelter with little heating as the winter closes in. There are a further 6.5 million internal refugees still inside Syria. And figures released this week show that more than 10,000 children have been killed in the fighting. Our international editor, Lindsay Hilson, is in Damascus tonight. Lindsay.
John, a leaked confidential UN report today said that 250,000 Syrians within the country urgently need aid and they aren't getting it. Why not? Partly because the government ties up humanitarian aid in red tape, it blocks convoys, and at times the myriad of different rebel groups, they also stop aid getting through. Red Crescent workers, UN workers, some have been killed, others kidnapped, others detained. So this humanitarian crisis, it's not just an accidental byproduct of war. It's because humanitarian aid is being used as a weapon of war.
They look like such normal kids, but their families have fled to central Damascus from the suburbs, where they saw things no child should see. There was no life, everything was dead, he says. Everyone was mourning their children who had been killed. There was nothing but fighting and shelling, she says, and I didn't have any friends to play with. At least they're safe here. Every day they go to classes at a centre where displaced people learn marketable skills. Men's grooming is popular. The project was originally for refugees from Iraq, but the cycle of misery in the Middle East has moved round.
How old are you? For example, my name is Tom.
Now most of the Iraqis have gone home. One has stayed on to teach English to his former hosts. Syrians didn't need food aid before the war. They do now. The women tell me everyday items such as sugar and chicken have increased sixfold or more. Getting supplies to Damascus is easy, but nearly half the places UN agencies are trying to reach are contested or in rebel hands.
We're moving thousands of truckloads of food every single month. With thousands of drivers who have families at home who worry about them as well. And it's frequently just a simple case that they are too frightened to go into particular areas until the fighting calms down.
Fighting and a government blockade are preventing food from reaching tens of thousands of civilians in the suburbs around the capital that are under rebel control. Many of these people have fled the Damascus suburbs, which is still besieged. Very little is getting in or out. Over the summer, people there have been able to survive because they grow vegetables. But the winter is coming, and the fear is that the government will use food as a weapon of war and try and starve out both the rebel fighters and the residents. These pictures of empty shelves are in East Ghouta, a suburb controlled by the rebels and besieged by government forces for more than a year. Even vegetables seem to be running low now. People use firewood to cook because gas is in short supply. And sometimes even that's too expensive. Malek has been reduced to cooking on animal dung. Her husband hasn't worked since he was wounded, so she uses her meagre earnings as a seamstress to feed their 3 boys.
We eat only one meal a day, and if we have some food, they can have soup in the morning. Some days they do not eat. Only one meal in the afternoon, that's all. That's what we can manage.
The country is crisscrossed with front lines. More than 2,000 rebel groups are fighting each other and the regime. Local Red Crescent volunteers are often the only ones who can persuade an angry man with a gun to let supplies in.
It comes to the guy on the checkpoint, and sometimes he says, okay, you have the approval, but those people inside, they killed my brother, they killed my mother, they killed my father. I will never let you in. I will never let you deliver food for the people who are shooting at me. It comes to that.
Routine vaccinations. 17 cases of polio, eradicated in Syria a decade and a half ago, have now been confirmed. The crippling disease was apparently brought in by jihadi fighters from Pakistan, where it's endemic.
There was quite a sense of panic. This panic, in a way, was positive on our side because it helped us to make the community realize that it is important to bring their children for vaccination, and also for the community to accept those vaccinators who are coming house to house.
Government and rebels are now allowing vaccines across the lines, but more food and other medicines are urgently needed. War has brought in its wake an era of hunger and disease that no Syrian could have imagined in this century.